Hello, everyone. My name is Madison Postma. I'm a recent graduate, finally, from the Master of Forest Conservation program at the University of Toronto. And today I'll be presenting my graduate capstone paper titled Assessing the Introduction and Age of the Acer platanoides, or Norway Maple, Invasion within the Wilket Creek ravine in Toronto, Ontario. So to begin, I'm just going to give a bit of a background. So the Wilket Creek was originally purchased in 1827 by a prosperous Scottish wool and lumber producer named Alexander Milne. Once Milne realized that the creek wasn't strong enough to power his wool and lumber mills, he moved his operation to the banks of the Don River in 1832. Wilket Creek stayed within the Milne family for 100 years, but was pretty much left to overgrow. In 1944, a Toronto businessman named Rupert Edwards purchased Milne's original homestead, about 11 hectares on the Wilket Creek. Edwards transformed the overgrown property into his own country oasis, with creating elaborate gardens, ponds, a private 9-hole golf course, and one of Canada's largest rockeries. However, as development started to inch towards the property in the 1950s, Edwards decided to sell his oasis to the City of Toronto under the condition that it would become a public park. In 1956, Edward Gardens was open to the public. Fast forward to 2006, the Toronto Botanical Garden was born, opening a series of publicly accessible themed gardens over 4 acres. Here are some aerial shots of Wilket Creek and Edward Gardens. The earliest aerial photo is from 1938, which would have been roughly 6 years before it was bought by Edwards. The second photo is from 1956, the year that Edward Gardens was opened. Two things are really interesting about this transition. One being that there are a lot more trees in 1956 than in 1938, thanks to Edward Gardens. And two is the suburban development that you can see to start to encroach on the property. The final photo is from 2019. Which we can see the Toronto Botanical Garden main building along with the suburban development. So just a few facts about Norway Maple. The Norway Maple is the most common maple species in Europe, with its range extending into Asia Minor. Here in North America, it's considered an invasive non-native tree, which was brought over in the late 1700s as an ornamental tree, and therefore became extremely popular because of its dense canopies, quick growth, and ability to grow in a wide range of conditions. Norway maple have a very high reproductive output and range. Seeds are dispersed via wind and can be carried well over 100 meters from the parent tree. The Norway maple are also extremely shade tolerant and create a dense canopy with a shallow root system. All of these characteristics allow the invasive maple to easily outcompete and take over natural areas when introduced. So moving on to my objectives. So my broad goal or objective for this study was to improve the overall knowledge of Norway maple invasion within the Wilket Creek ravine in Toronto. My specific objectives were to determine the age of the invasion and investigate when, where, and how Norway maples were introduced to the ravine, and to improve the understanding of the Norway maple distribution and structure. Continuing to my study area. So the study area is 15.5 hectares, which includes the Toronto Botanical Gardens and surrounding Edward Gardens, encompassing the Wilket Creek ravine. Oh, sorry there, ignore my Norton. The site is located just south of St. Lawrence Avenue, between Leslie Street and the Bridle Path. My primary focus within the site is the natural area portion, covering about 4.1 hectares, which is highlighted green on the map. The natural areas within the study range from hardwood to mixed wood stands, dominated by species such as sugar maple, white cedar, black cherry, and red oak. For my study, 44 Norway maple amongst 6 diameter classes were randomly selected from a data set that was graciously provided by Catherine Baird at the Toronto Botanical Garden. For each of our selected trees, we took core samples using an increment bore. Trees with a diameter of 20 centimeters or over had 2 cores taken from either side of the tree, while anything less just had 1 core, since we were able to get the bore completely through the tree. There was a total of 75 cores. Diameter measurements were also taken and recorded again where the cores were taken. And 38 monitoring plots were also established by Captain Baird using the vegetation sampling protocol, so VSP, over the summer. Going on to my results. So as we can see here, looking from the VSP data that we received from Catherine, the average relative cover of Norway maple per plot in the shrub layer was 0.4%, with a max of 4.5% and a minimum of 0. The Norway maple average cover of the ground layer was 0.14%, with a max of 1.5 and a minimum of 0. However, we do see that plot presence gave some interesting results. Norway maple was found in 23 of the 38 VSP plots, so roughly 60%. And the ground cover, Norway maple was found in 31 of the 38 VSP plots, so around 82%. Taking a look at the Norway maple data set from the Toronto Botanical Gardens, there were a total of 172 Norway maple ranging from 5 to 50 centimeters in diameter within the study site. As you can see, there's a perfect reverse J happening, with the highest amount of Norway maples ranging from 5 to 15 dBH, 82 trees, and gradually decreasing to 1 tree between 55 and 65 in diameter. So here are the trees within the site. The blue dots represent the trees that were cored for this study, and the yellow represent the rest of the Norway maples within the site. The bigger the dot, the bigger the diameter. Very interesting to note the clumpings throughout the study site, especially those in the south and the east, as well as the almost string of Norway maples in the middle. With ArcMap, we determined the total basal area to be 6.54 meters squared, or about 1.31 meters squared per hectare, which equals to roughly 34.4 trees per hectare. Going on to the collected data from the 44 cored Norway maple, we found that the average diameter at the cord height was 39.7 centimeters, with a minimum of 7.4 and a maximum of 54.3. As for tree age, which was obtained via counting the rings on each of the cords, the average Norway maple age was found to be 38.7, with the youngest tree being 18 years old and the oldest being 77 years old. Looking at our sampling effort, we can see that the majority of the Norway maple are between the ages of 18 and 48. We can also see that there's a drop in older trees. This is very important to highlight because it not only shows the age of introduction, but it also allows us to see the results of what a few trees can produce over 30 to 40 years. We also performed a simple linear regression analysis of the tree age and the core collected diameter for the sampled trees. We did this to determine if diameter at breast height could be used to infer the ages of the remaining Norway maple within the study site. Although it is known that diameter is not always the most ideal method of determining tree age, we found that it made the most sense within the limits of the study, as the results showed a positive and statistically significant correlation between the two indicators. Moving on to my discussion. In reference to our Norway maple data from the VSP dataset, we found that although Norway maple are not abundant within the ground and shrub layers, Norway maple seedlings and saplings are frequent throughout the study area. This is very interesting because it shows how Norway maple are generating in areas of the forest where no mature trees are found. As for our tree age and invasion, introduction likely began in the 1940s, as our oldest tree was in the area was 77 years old. This correlates well with the increased expansion of suburbia outside of Toronto post-World War I and with the creation of Edwards Country Paradise. Norway maple would have been extremely popular at the time, and although there are no original garden plans, it can be speculated that Rupert Edwards would have planted Norway maple within his gardens, and especially along his golf course, because of their large shaded area that they provide. However, we also see that it wasn't until the late 1980s into the 1990s that we can see that the invasion really took flight. This would have been placed the oldest tree within the site at around 50 to 40 years old. It is believed that the boom of the 1980s and 90s was not just from the established trees within the study area, but also with the increase of suburbia, which had completely surrounded the area at that time. Public access to Wilket Creek could have also played a large role in the spread of Norway maple, along with other invasives on the property. Overall, the Norway Maple invasion within the Wilket Creek is the result of not recognizing and not managing invasive species within natural areas, even within just the first 40 years of their introduction. Now for conclusions and recommendations. In regards to the study's objectives, we can make a few conclusions. So firstly, Norway Maple was introduced into the study area in the 1940s due to the increase in housing development and extensive gardens and recreational areas. Secondly, Norway Maple are present in almost all areas of the property with a basal area of 1.13 meters squared per hectare and 34.4 trees per hectare. And finally, Norway Maple regeneration is abundant in almost all areas of the property, as only 7 of the 38 VSP plots had no Norway Maple present. If not managed, Norway Maple will continue to harm the ecological integrity of the ravine. But what can we do? So from the results and conclusions of my study, I have come up with 3 main recommendations. For the first and most important would be to remove and control the Norway Maple within the site. This would be a very long, costly process, as it would cost roughly $1,000 per mature tree to remove, not including any need for chemical control on seedlings and saplings. However, the only way to stop the invasion would be to slowly remove all of the Norway Maple trees and deplete the seed bank. Control measures and monitoring would also have to be put in place, especially in areas where there are a lot of Norway Maple removed, just to ensure that native species are regenerating and not other invasives. Again, this is extremely costly and long-term solution, but this is the price we have to pay when invasives are ignored and not properly managed. The second recommendation is public education and outreach. Thankfully, the Toronto Botanical Garden is already heavily involved in public education. My recommendation would be to take advantage of this platform and have the Toronto Botanical Garden host non-native versus native education workshops and seminars specifically geared towards backyard trees and how they influence nearby natural areas and ecosystems. Even hosting outreach events, having volunteers just remove Norway Maple seedlings and saplings. Educational signage along trails highlighting issues that Norway Maples cause would also be really beneficial. Finally, as you all know, nothing can be done without legislation. Creating concrete bylaws that ensuring only native or non-invasive trees can be planted within new and established suburbs or within proximity to natural areas, and forbidding tree nurseries to grow and distribute known invasive species and their cultivars would play a huge role on managing and eliminating invasive trees within natural areas. I'd just like to take a second and thank Dr. Daniela Pirek-Maldinovich for giving me the opportunity to do this study and for her support and patience through this entire project. Captain Baird at the Toronto Botanical Garden for assisting me in collecting my core samples, for finding, mapping, and measuring the Norway Maple within the study site, and for collecting most of the VSP data, and her endless support and resources. To my colleagues Adam and Krish for also helping me collecting my core samples. I'd also like to thank Dr. Jay Malcolm, Tony, and Paul for their assistance during my core prep. And finally, thank you to Project Learning Tree Canada, Daniel's faculty, and the University Work Study Program for funding this project.